I wasn't sure going into this whether we would see whether the pandemic slowed or killed down. There was a headline by a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, did the pandemic kill servitization? Professor Baines kind of looked at that right at the start of the challenge. And it's because we saw, those outcome-based organisations, whether it's aviation, print copy, we've seen it in so many different sectors, and their revenues fell off a cliff. But as I mentioned, the flip side of it, customers coming closer together, economic backdrop as well, I think we'll touch on a little bit. But let's dive into some of the data. We actually saw, to answer that question, the headline question I wanted to look at was how many, and this is, just to put the context in, this is a study that had nearly 200 global service leaders, and we asked, how, top line question, who has introduced or has an active servitized element within the business. Now, 68%, so over 2/3 of the organisations in this study, did say that they had some form of servitized element. I'm just going to put some context around that from the last couple of years. We've been hosting studies around this topic for the best part of a decade now. And we've consistently seen that number growing, but I thought it was interesting to see pre-pandemic, pandemic and this year. And we have seen a slight slowdown. In 2020 it was 58%. That leapt to 64% in 2021, and this year it slowed down a little bit. But it's still a growing movement. And we're now looking at 2 out of 3 companies have some form of servitized element in their service portfolio. So I suppose the opening piece is to understand, you guys, as we just looked at, have a number of different touch points across service organisations, particularly manufacturing as well as other areas. How does that correlate with your real life interactions?
Mm-hmm.
Emanuel, maybe
Sure.
you can start.
So actually, I think seeing this as an increasing number really reflects our experiences during the last year. So we saw a real upturn or increasing requests for field service solutions around the 2020, 2019. That's where it really sort of felt like a boom or like a trend, really. All of a sudden, our customers were asking for field service solutions, and that kept on growing. We were really able to focus on that, and interestingly enough, we did not feel a slowdown on our side during the pandemic. I think the pandemic, even at least in my, let's say, subjective how do you say it, a view, it even felt like an accelerator, because the trends of digitalization, of course, also were, or borders of digitalization were no longer really there, especially in the German market. Like remote services, remote working, and all of these things have been a little bit slowed down by bureaucracy, post-pandemic, so to say. So we really got the feeling that whatever happened to the pandemic put the pressure on CTOs, on IT managers all across the country to be a bit more relaxed, if that makes sense, in terms of what they can offer. Not only service-wise, but generally how they can keep being in business and making use of different business modules. So for us, it really has felt like an acceleration rather than a slowdown during the pandemic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. It was, especially when we look at certain areas, like remote service. I've been talking about remote service since 2015. And how that can play a massive role in kind of just revolutionising the entire way that we approach field service. But you're right, Emanuel, to your point, there was a lot of red tape that was slowing it down. And equally, I think on the other side of it, there was a lot of customer resistance. There was this mindset, this shift of mindset that we wanted to see from guarantees of uptime and we'll get you back up and running as soon as possible, which something like remote is superb for. Obviously IoT data and asset data is critical, but they still wanted to see that engineer on site, didn't they? They still wanted to have that kind of that visual touch point, and they wanted that SLA, and it was, the pandemic changed that entirely. It was like, how do you get me running? How do we get something changed? And so there was a mindset shift that we saw. Max, similar kind of question, really. I mean, again, we've talked a little bit there around a lot of the technology that was not born out of the pandemic. That's the wrong way of phrasing it. That was accelerated, to use Emanuel's terminology. Are you seeing that still continuing to grow? And how does that align with the challenges of shifting to servitization? Whereas the technology for me is an underpinning, isn't it? And there's the service strategy that goes above it. Just talk to us about that.
Definitely. So I think there's 4 aspects basically to it. So indeed, I, same like Emanuel, see a large growth in new customers. It was really an accelerator. People started to think about, okay, what can I do without having that remote access? But I think it also goes even beyond that. Technology has evolved significantly in these 2 years because of the demand of the customers. Microsoft released great functionality in that area. We as HSO developed that concept further for our best-of-breed industry solution in that area, especially on servitization. These have been the latest releases that we've did in the pandemic years. So that is really the key topic that we focused on. But I also see that you mentioned aviation and Rolls-Royce. So customers that have heavy or let's say high capex assets that pay off at the later stage, they actually faced issues due to that. And therefore, I also see that these companies are a bit doubting if it is the right strategy for that area. While I see producers of less capex investment areas, they really go fully into it and want to go after it. So that's still something that I can see in the market. These high capex investors, they start thinking differently, I think, since this year a bit. Also going back to traditional models every now and then again. That's what I see. But also that it basically separates, that they want to put these services on top of what they currently sell. So that's, they try to restructure this approach a little bit for them as well. But overall, I would say there's definitely a growth in that area. More and more companies want to leverage that. And indeed, it goes also across solutions. With the cloud, we are not talking about ERP anymore. It is indeed about data insights, maybe BI, maybe the Internet of Things. What is the state of the possible that I can get out of that? Service companies started to realize the worth of data and therefore also look beyond that. And therefore, for us, from a product offering perspective, it gets also more and more complex to solve these demands, because you basically have to not be just an ERP or a field service solution implementer anymore. You have to be across the bandwidth. You have to build mobile applications out of the sudden. You have to give customer portals ways of interacting via the web. And I believe, and since we're both German, especially in Germany, the bureaucracy was a thing about that. But also in the other companies, you really saw that all of that was suddenly away, and people could walk their steps because there was an urgent need to do so.
Hi there, my name is Kris Oldland. I'm the Editor-in-Chief and founder of Field Service News. I hope you found that short excerpt from one of our in-depth, long-form interviews of use. If you did, then why not have a look at an FSN Pro membership? This will give you access to over 70 hours plus of in-depth, long-form interviews where you can access the full interview. You also get access to the world's leading resource library dedicated specifically to the field service management sector. Over 130 resources that cover key areas such as digital transformation in field service, remote service technology and how that aligns to on-site service delivery, servitization, advanced services. All of these key areas and many more. There are key resources so you can learn from your peers and those that are leading the way in how the field service world is evolving. There's also the new FSN education platform, and we're adding courses there every single month, with already a number of masterclass courses that don't just give you knowledge but actually give you the blueprint so you can develop a program within your own organization and see real world value. You can access all of this content for just £450 a month, or you can access it on a monthly basis at £45 a month. Head over to fieldservicenews.com, subscribe and find out more.